On November 4th, 1966, a rare combination of abnormally high tides, rain-swollen rivers, and a fierce scirocco wind filled the Venice lagoon to bursting, and floodwaters flowed over the canals, reaching a height of almost 2 meters. It was the worst flood in the city's history. Thousands of residents were blocked in their homes for days, and artworks, valued at billions of euros, stored on ground floors or in cellars, were ruined. Venice was suddenly recognized as a city in grave danger. The man-made Venice lagoon has 3 inlets from the sea. The only practical way to keep out the high tides, engineers decided, was to construct 3 mobile barriers, placing 1 at each of the 3 inlets.
This system is absolutely needed for Venice. I have demonstrated many times that floods deteriorate the strength of the walls. So I don't know exactly when, but I'm sure that without this barrier, after a certain period, the walls of the embankment, the wall of the building will fail.
Critics claimed the project wouldn't work at all.
I wasn't in favour of it. I believed that such a large sum could have been spent better. Half of the money could have been spent on a series of low-impact interventions at the inlets to the lagoon to protect the city against high water. My office presented several different projects, and the rest of the money could have paid for crucial ordinary maintenance measures and popular housing.
The trouble is you still have to evaluate whether Venice needs to be protected or not. And you have to then, say, well, what can we do to limit damage to the lagoon? And what is the least of 2 evils? I think that the consideration, what is the least of various evils, is not one that people are not very good at making in a sophisticated way. Risk assessment and cost-benefit studies, these things are not really happening. So it doesn't help people come to sensible decisions. In addition, everything in Italy becomes politicized.
5 years ago, a scientific conference in Cambridge, in Britain, concluded Venice needed a barrier to protect it from flooding. In 2003, the project was finally set in motion, and the system is expected to start operating in 2014. The mobile barrier system is called MOSE, the acronym in Italian for Experimental Electromechanic Module. It will cost 4.5 billion euros and will consist of 3 barriers, 1 for each of the lagoon's 3 mouths to the Adriatic. The system consists of 78 massive gates, each 20 meters wide and up to 28 meters high, fixed to the lagoon floor that will rise up to seal Venice's lagoon from the Adriatic when high tides are forecast.
You will not anymore have the people with the shops on the ground floor having to take all their goods up and stack them somewhere else. You won't have people having to put the barriers up at their front doors to stop the water sloshing in.
The same tides that were not flooding the city 100 years ago are now high tide events. It's called Acqua Alta. High water afflicts Venice mostly in the winter. A century ago it happened 7 times a year. Now it's more likely 100. Meanwhile, construction of the mobile barrier system is underway out in the lagoon. In an effort not to alter the landscape, at one of the inlets, the work site is situated on a specially built artificial island that will be demolished once the project is completed.
On top of these pillars, this area we have prepared, we will construct the caissons, the concrete caissons, which are very heavy, 20,000 tons each. And later on we will put trolleys underneath these caissons with pistons, 84 trolleys. We will lift the caisson and then transfer it slowly on a launching platform down there on the sea.
The gates will be attached to the caissons, concrete bases that will be sunk into the seabed, and will be hinged so they will lie flat along the bottom at most times.
This is a basement, concrete basement, that is below the seabed. The gates normally are laid on top of this basement. When you put air in this steel structure, the gate comes up. And the upper side of this steel structure comes out of the water. The elevation of the water is more or less like this. And when you open the valve and you let the water come inside the gate again, it goes down.
In normal conditions, the 78 hinged gates will rest horizontally at the bottom of the ocean, filled with water. But when flooding is expected, the gates will fill with compressed air. This causes them to rise until they break the surface of the water. The gates are close enough to one another to prevent much water from passing between them. Venetians have mixed feelings about the barriers.
Personally, I hope they work. Most Venetians are against the Mose because they think an enormous amount of money has been wasted on something that may only be used on very rare occasions.
This is a rather low area, so whenever there's high water, I end up working with my feet in the water. I hope the Mose will work.
I'm convinced that the Mose is going to cause a lot of divorces in Venice, because husbands and wives are always arguing. The Mose works. The Mose isn't going to work.
Engineers say the Mose
is the best possible solution, will protect the city, I mean, forever, as you, is not, it's difficult to say, but for many, many decades, for at least 1 century, but in combination with other interventions more than this.
So, we're spending €4.5 billion for a system that'll only last 50 or 60 years? This uncertainty is the reason we proposed a series of smaller scale interventions. If you're going to spend all this money, it ought to be for a definitive structure.
As for the cost, 4.5 billion is a lot of money, but if you're saying that Venice is not worth 4.5 billion, what are you saying? I don't think you can say that. But it's not worth it if you don't sensibly integrate it into forward planning and use the money that you have spent now to give you the time to work out what you're going to do afterwards.
The debate over how to safeguard Venice and preserve its buildings and art treasures for successive generations will not end soon. Even though no solution for Venice lasts forever, the new barrier system may give Venetians the time they need to develop whatever kind of protection needs to come next. Achtner, PressTV, Venice.